Jennifer Lynn Wilkerson was a 26-year-old from Lubbock, Texas. She was somewhat of a tomboy and could make friends with anyone. On July 12, 2004, she went to work, then spent the night at her new boyfriend's. The next day, her car was discovered back at her place. Her keys were hung up inside her home, but Jennifer was gone. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. We are all living a double life. Yes, it's true. No, I don't mean all of us have a family on the east side of the country who we lie to so we can go see our family on the west side of the country. No, nothing so scandalous or laborious. But as we know, those situations are exposed once in a while. I'm talking about something much more personal. The double life we have in our minds. On one hand, we have that mental state which is meant for others. The confident one, the friendly one, or the unconfident one, or antisocial one, depending on what we need and what people expect from us. Then we have the mental state in our private moments, that side we suppress from others. Likewise, it could be confident or non-confident, violent or peaceful. Once again, it all depends on who we think we are. Carl Jung talked about this in his psychological work. He called what we don't show people the shadow. And his belief was those people who could most constructively integrate the shadow into their public lives would be the most mentally healthy. And he called the process of doing this individuation. And because none of us are perfect, we all have a shadow. Thus, we are living a certain kind of double life. The person others see and the one they don't. Why do I bring this up? Once the police started investigating Jennifer Wilkerson's disappearance, and you'll hear this in the interview, they told Vicky, Jennifer's mother, that Jennifer was living a certain kind of double life. On one hand, she had the life she showed to her family, going to school, getting good grades, and working. Then there was the other side that police discovered. Jennifer hanging out with gang members, consorting with meth users and dealers, with Jennifer taking part in the activities. But before you go judging Jennifer too harshly, it's my firm belief that her actions were just an outward expression of what we all have inside us, that double life. That side Jennifer showed certain people, and the side she didn't. But in her case, Jennifer might have taken it too far. Still, I'm not convinced Jennifer's double life led to her disappearance. No, let me rephrase that. I'm not convinced it was Jennifer's shadow that led to her disappearance. In fact, I think it was something in the public light, something that she had no reason to hide at all. And now, a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's site, charleyproject.org. Jennifer Wilkerson was last seen at approximately 11 a.m. on July 13, 2004, at her boyfriend's residence near the 2400 block of 188th Street in Lubbock, Texas. From there, she allegedly went home with plans to work at Nothing But Smokes at 1 p.m. that day. However, she never arrived at her job. Jennifer's car, a black 1999 Honda Civic Coupe, was found parked at her trailer later that day. Her home was locked, and her car and house keys were inside. Also found were money and all of her possessions except for a tan shoulder strap purse. She never contacted her employer to say she would be absent from work. Neither of her two roommates saw her that day or since. During their investigation, police stated they were looking for a small black truck set low to the ground with an out-of-state license plate that was near Jennifer's residence around the time she might have arrived home. This truck may have been equipped with low-rider hydraulics and tinted windows. This vehicle and its driver have never been located or identified. Jennifer's boyfriend at the time, Brandon, and her roommates have been cleared of suspicion in her disappearance. Her best friend believes Jennifer was associating with drug users and possibly using drugs herself, and was trying to hide much of it from the people closest to her. Authorities believe Wilkerson is missing under suspicious circumstances. Her case remains unsolved. The interview is with Jennifer's mother, Vicki Wilkerson. Unfound news. By the time you're listening to this, I'm in Pennsylvania. I'll be here for about a month. I'm hoping to meet a couple guests who have appeared on Unfound while I'm here. I'm also looking forward to meeting my book editor who has worked with me on some novels I've written. Yes, really. You can find them on Amazon. Lots of things are converging for Unfound right now. The website continues to be put together little by little. I'm thinking it's going to be available for public consumption once the first of the Unfound books is published, so probably not until September. Speaking of which, the transcriptions of the interviews are trickling in, and the work these people have done has been really good. I'm really impressed. I hope you will be too. Finally, I need to give a shout out to some people who are constant contributors to the Unfound podcast discussion group. These are people whose names I see almost on a daily basis in the group. Dorothy, Amy, John, Virginia, Stephanie, Dee Dee, Roseanne, Lynn, and Jeremiah. I want to thank them and everyone who adds to the discussion on Facebook. Where you can find Unfound. On Twitter, @Unfound Podcast. On Instagram, @Unfound Podcast. You can email the program, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. The previously mentioned discussion group, the Unfound Podcast discussion group on Facebook. Subscribe at Podomatic, iTunes, and Stitcher. Have you noticed that I've been mentioning Stitcher a little bit more this past week? I hope you have. And please mention Unfound at Websleuths, Reddit, podcasts we listen to, and all other true crime websites and forums. I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Jennifer Wilkerson, Vicki Wilkerson. Vicki, welcome to Unfound.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, Vicki. Tell the listeners a little bit about Jennifer, her interests, what it was like for her growing up in Hobbs, New Mexico.
Well, Jennifer was always a happy child and a happy young lady. She had a love for sports. When she was in elementary, she was in dance and played fast pitch softball. And as she got up in her junior high years, she kept her passion for sports and basketball, and she was somewhat of a little tomboy. It wasn't unusual to catch her with a group of boys that she hadn't grown up with, basically. She would rather be out doing energy things like boys do, you know, running after rabbits or fishing or camping, and she never was much of a girly girl. It really irritated her to take a lot of time putting makeup on. She wanted to slap a little mascara on and head out with the guys. And she had a passion for music and loved going to concerts. She always did very, very well in school. She made straight A's through elementary. She was accelerated classes in junior high. And she had a lot of friends, and they meant a lot to her, but she was real focused on getting out and enjoying life, and most of the time it was outside activities, like I said, and she was just a pretty good kid. And, you know, growing up in Hobbs, a little small town, not much to do. You could only go bowling and go to the shows so much. You know, they'd hang out at each other's house and experience with things that probably put gray hair in mom's heads, but never got in any trouble. She was just a pretty good kid all around.
Would you say that she was more like you or more like her father?
Jennifer and I didn't have a lot of things in common, actually.
Okay.
But she was real close to her dad, and they had a lot of things in common. They liked a lot of the same music, which she loved everything from Andy Williams to Tool. And her dad and her little sister went to several concerts together. And but as far as mannerisms and being positive and upbeat and taking life as it came to you, she definitely took after her dad in that respect.
Okay. And you have at least two daughters. Did you just have two daughters, or do you have any other children?
No, I had three.
You had three. Okay.
Jennifer had an older sister that was 8 years older than she is, and she loved. Her name is Michelle, and she loved her. She absolutely idolized her big sister. And then she had a younger sister, Jackie, that was 22 months younger than her. And it was kind of comical. They were different as day and night. Jackie takes more after me. And when they were little, my husband's an avid reader, and so we had library full of books. Well, one of Jennifer's favorite things was to pull the books out of the bookshelf when she was 3 and 4, 5, and which was kind of irritating to her dad because he liked to keep it all orderly and in alphabetical order. But Jennifer learned really quick that Jackie was the baby, and she was little enough to where she could make it look like Jackie pulled all the books down, and then that way she got to have fun and not get in trouble.
That's funny. That's funny. A little bit mischievous, Jennifer was, right?
Oh yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Okay. How did she end up making her way to Lubbock? How did that end up that she went from New Mexico to Texas?
Well, she had a friend named Danielle that had moved to Lubbock sometime before, and they had been hanging out here in Hobbs for a long time. They'd been friends for a while. And Jennifer had been in a pretty close relationship with a young man named Scotty, and they felt like maybe a change would be nice, more possibilities, more activities. And it turned out that Scotty wasn't quite in the relationship where Jennifer was, and he didn't end up moving over there. But Jennifer went over and moved in with Danielle, and that was, I think, in late 2000, maybe early 2001, probably late 2000.
Mm-hmm.
She went over there and got a job at Convergys. And
what is Convergys? What kind of business is that?
It's a telephone marketing type business.
Okay.
Where you just take customer service and stuff like that. She really didn't care for it a lot, but she was there for a little bit.
And she got some other jobs though. She ended up working at Wells Fargo, I guess, in a bank, and she ended up going to school. What can you tell listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, after she left Convergys, she got a job at Wells Fargo, and she liked it real well, but that was customer service, and she was really good at it. Never heard a lot of complaints. Customer service can be a little bit trying at times.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point that she had a couple of other friends that were going to Texas Tech, and they had encouraged her to start back to school. And so she decided to go back to South Plains to become a paralegal. And I can remember her saying, wow, I'm going to be 40 years old before I finish college. And I said, well, Jennifer, what are you going to be when you're 40 years old if you don't? So she was real excited and had a lot of encouragement from her two Texas Tech friends and excelled. She made straight A's the first 3 semesters, and she just really loved it.
Now, she was also, she had a couple other jobs, but she was, I found these couple stories very interesting. She was a young woman who had a schedule. She had a couple things that she would do every day. What can you tell the listeners about the Dr. Pepper? Because this is going to be relevant to her disappearance, and the receipts that she would always keep. Tell the listeners a little bit about that.
Well, any and everyone that knows Jennifer knows that she had to have a supersonic Dr. Pepper with extra ice at least once a day, if not twice or three times. And she generally kept all of her receipts. I can hear her asking for it because I was with her several times, asking for her supersonic Dr. Pepper, please. And she also, working when she had quit Wells Fargo and had gone to work for Nothing But Smokes. Of course, they sell cigarettes, and Jennifer was always very conscientious about keeping her receipts so that there was never any question that, she didn't pay for any cigarettes that she may have gotten out of the store. And I found several of those receipts in her car after she disappeared, dating up to July the 12th, which was the day before she came up missing.
But no receipt for July 13th, the next day.
No.
Okay.
Not for cigarettes, not for Dr. Pepper.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Okay.
And I'd even asked the roommates, did you find a half-drank Dr. Pepper in the house? I mean, did y'all find any Dr. Peppers? And, of course, they hadn't, but...
Now, she had a couple other jobs. She worked at Wells Fargo for a while, but then she ended up working, like you said, at a place called Nothing But Smokes, and also a shutter company. And I understand she also worked for maybe a job on the side where she worked concerts. So seemed to be working quite a bit. She was not afraid of work. Can you tell listeners anything about those jobs? Because I think some of those people that she ran into those jobs, might be relevant, as we go through this interview.
Right. Well, in 2001, after she had started school, she decided to move out of Danielle's place and move into an apartment of her own, because she was going to school full time, working at the different concerts, setting them up. She was still working at Wells Fargo at that time, but she moved into Bear Creek, and then a friend of hers that she had met as her hairdresser back in when she first moved there, named Dax, brought up the subject of maybe moving in with him and paying for a room, just totally as friends, nothing romantically. And it would save her money, and, she thought that would be a good idea. So about probably early 2002, she moved in with Dax, and shortly after that lost her job at Wells Fargo. And she struggled a little bit after that. She did lawn work with Dax. She did some work at a place called Shepherd Shutters, which is a company that put ex-cons that have come out of prison to work and give them a chance, to get back on their feet as productive citizens. And then, odds and ends, I don't know that she ever got paid for any of her concert work, but I know that she was out there a lot, and if anything, it would help her get in to the concert free. So...
Sure, people do that, sure.
Yeah, and she was continuing school at that time, but I think that was probably the last semester she actually went into class.
Okay, and what year would that have been, you think?
That would have been in 2002.
Okay. Now, you already mentioned Dax, but we are going to talk about some people that were around, that were friends of hers, but were around her, around Jennifer during those last couple years. And Jennifer was very popular. I've talked to a friend of hers named Allison. We're not going to give her last name. She's helped me put this interview together. And Jennifer was very popular. She ran a lot of different circles. And we're going to talk about a few of those people and just some things maybe that Jennifer might have, some drama, I guess you could say, that was going on in Jennifer's life, maybe in the year to 2 years before she disappeared. But we're not going to mention any last names here. Since we already mentioned Dax, things with him started out well, but they kind of soured. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Well, I guess it got to the point that Dax was angry because Jennifer wasn't paying the rent on her home, on her room. And Jennifer felt like she was working with Dax at his business, and that was what was paying for his room. She helped him with a lot of odd and end things, and to her, that was supposed to be covering her room and board. And Dax saw it differently. He started treating her very ugly, and which led to a friend of his named James knew that it was very uncomfortable for Jennifer and introduced him to his, at that time, girlfriend, Jessica. And they decided Jessica wanted Jennifer to move in with her, and that is where she was living when she disappeared.
And Dax took Jennifer to court for some money,
Yeah,
but was not
yes,
totally successful.
No, he asked, I don't know exactly what he was asking for, but I think she had to pay like $300, and it was just less than half of what he was asking for, I'm sure, and because the court felt like she had paid the rent, and that Dax wasn't being, I guess, completely honest with what misunderstanding or whatever. They felt like she had paid for her room.
Okay, so she and Dax started out good. He was originally her hairdresser. They moved in together, had a little bit of a falling out. They end up in small claims court, it sounds like. What can you tell the listeners about Terry? He was a guy who seemed to like Jennifer, but might have taken a little far.
Yeah, Terry was the other roommate that lived with Dax, and I got to meet him. We had a nice barbecue. Allison was there. Everything seemed good. This was before everything started falling apart. Well, shortly after this, Jennifer had told me she just loved Terry to death, that they were good friends. And shortly after my visit over there, Jennifer called, and at a middle of a birthday party, Terry had decided that he was madly in love with her and really came on to her really strong, which shocked Jennifer. And, of course, she put it to rest really quick, telling him, we're friends, that's it. Well, he was a little obsessed with her and did some stalking, and eventually got so bad, I think he got on some drugs, that Dax kicked him out. And that happened before Jennifer actually left Dax's home.
Okay. And what year would you say that this incident with Terry happened, and what year and how long did he end up stalking her, but maybe before, he eventually lost interest or just moved on his way? You know what year that was?
It was in 2002.
Okay, so still a couple years before she disappeared.
Yeah, probably close to the end of 2002, because that probably all happened within 4 to 5 months before Jennifer left Dax's house to move in with Jessica.
Okay. Let's talk about Jessica. How long did Jennifer live with her? And we should once again remind the listeners, this is who Jennifer was living with when she disappeared. And what can you tell about Jessica? She had a couple different boyfriends while they were all living together. What went on with that?
Well, Jennifer lived there for about a year before her disappearance. And like I said, James was Jessica's boyfriend at the time Jennifer moved in. James is the one that introduced her to Jessica, and they seemed to get along. Jessica was younger, quite a bit younger than Jennifer, actually. they seemed to get along fine. Shortly after Jennifer moved in, James and Jessica broke up. And Jennifer was very happy about that. She didn't think that James was the right person for Jessica. And sometime after that, she started dating a young man named Jeremy. And
Jessica ended up dating Jeremy.
Yes.
So Jessica and James break up, and she has a new boyfriend, Jeremy. What went on after he moved in? And James, you suspected maybe that James might have had a crush on Jennifer before they broke up, before Jessica and he broke up.
Yes. I think he did have a crush on Jennifer, and a note was found that kind of gave proof of that. It hurt Jessica's feelings really bad because that was her boyfriend at the time. But, they talked about it and it was okay. Jessica had a new boyfriend named Jeremy that started spending a lot of time at the trailer after that. And Jennifer liked him just fine. It kind of irritated her. Jennifer was struggling making a car payment and rent, and Jeremy was kind of living there not paying anything, and that kind of irritated Jennifer. But other than that, they seemed to get along fine.
And this irritation that Jennifer had with Jeremy, how long did that occur before she disappeared?
I would say probably a month.
Not long before.
And she had actually told them that if Jeremy didn't start paying, at least a third of the rent since he was there by July the 24th, that she would be moving out.
And as we know, she disappeared before that. There was an incident that happened while Jennifer was living with Jessica, and I believe Jeremy was living there at the time. Jennifer had 2 of her tires slashed on her car.
Yes.
That happened. Any idea who that might have done that, just to be honest? And if you can answer that. If you don't know or you don't want to say, that's fine. And how long did this happen before Jennifer disappeared?
I'm not real sure. I think maybe it happened not long after she moved in with Jessica, probably the 1st of 2004. I believe she had gone back to work for a short time at Convergys, and it happened while her car was parked there. And I suspect that it might have been James, angry of the fact that he wasn't in the circle of Jessica and Jennifer any longer, and was kind of, I suspect that. I have no way of knowing, and I don't know that Jennifer knew.
If she did know, she never told you who did it.
No.
Or even who she suspected.
No.
Okay. We have one more guy that we need to talk about before we get into the details of her day of the disappearance. His name is Trey. What can you tell listeners about Trey? And that's Trey. Trey is his name.
Yeah. Also known as Maxie. They became friends when Jennifer first moved over to Lubbock in 2000. And I guess they saw each other from, time to time. Trey had a roommate named Holland, and Jennifer was taken with Holland, I think, a little bit more than Trey, and I think there was some hard feelings there. I don't know how long that they saw each other or ran around with each other, but I know at one point Jennifer didn't want to have anything to do with Trey for a while, and that probably went on to late 2003, early 2004, probably around 2003. They also started working together at Nothing But Smokes, and Jennifer said that he had changed, that they were having a good time, they were becoming really good friends again, She had talked about Trey coming to Hobbs and visiting with us. And this was like on a Monday or, front of the week. Well, then by the end of the week, Jennifer, this was probably her visit in April. She showed up and she said, "No, I'm not bringing Trey. We're not seeing each other." And she said it was because Trey couldn't keep his hands off of her. He was wanting to get too serious. She tried telling him that it was strictly a friendship and that she didn't want to be around him.
Okay, and that you said this was April of 2004, somewhere like that.
Yeah, all of that happened, I believe, between January and April. April is when she actually told me that he was really bugging her and she didn't want to be around him. She changed her phone number to avoid him so that he couldn't reach her. And that was what she had told me. I had talked to her the Sunday before she disappeared, that she told me she had changed phone numbers just so that Trey would not be able to reach her.
Okay, that sounds a little bit serious. And when you say she changed her number, did she have a cell phone or did she just have a regular phone?
She had a cell phone.
She had a cell phone. So she got her cell phone number changed because of Trey,
Yeah.
to your knowledge.
No, that was out of Jennifer's mouth, yes.
Oh, it was out of her nose. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was right out of her mouth. Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me. That's good information. Was Jennifer supposed to come and see you in the weeks after she disappeared? Of course, we know that she disappeared, but was there a plan in her near future to come back to see you in New Mexico, maybe later that month of July of 2004?
Yes. I talked to her on Sunday, which it would have been, the 11th, and we talked for some time. She was going to bring me her camera to video the ferrets and the rabbits and the kitties and the dogs playing, and she had made plans to come and visit us the Thursday after she disappeared.
And was she going to be coming alone, or do you believe that anybody was going to be coming with her?
She was hoping to get Brandon, a friend of hers that she had been seeing quite often for probably 4-6 weeks. She was hoping to get Brandon to come with her so that we could meet him.
Okay. Now, and we're going to talk about Brandon here in a bit. In fact, we're going to talk about him right now. What can you tell the listeners about what went on the day before Jennifer disappeared, and that would be July 12th, 2004, and into July 13th? What is known about her movement, her actions for those 2 days?
Well, it's my understanding that she did work on July the 12th. I know for a fact that all was well at 3:56 on July the 12th because I found a receipt where she had purchased cigarettes. After that, I've been told that she left work and went to Brandon's, and she had been staying there a lot, and I suppose stayed the night on the 12th and left his place early, I'd say early 9, 10-ish, to go home to her trailer and get dressed and go to work, I believe about 1 in the afternoon, and she never showed up for work.
It worked the next day on July 13th. Do you know how long she worked the day before July 12th? Did she work into the evening, like 6 or 7, or did she get off at 4 o'clock? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I would think that maybe she bought her pack of cigarettes as she was leaving, maybe the last thing before she left, she got her a pack of cigarettes, but I can't say that for a fact.
Okay. The reason I asked that is that she wasn't due to go into work the next day until 1 o'clock. And if she was also going to work 1 to 4 that day, it's a pretty short work shift. Maybe the day before she worked like 10 to 4, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then the next day she was going to maybe work at, on July 13th, maybe 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that. Is that possible?
That's possible.
Okay. And how do you know that she stayed at Brandon's? Did he come forward, volunteer that information that she stayed with him?
I guess Brandon is the one that did, or maybe Jessica and Jeremy knew that that's where she had been staying. That's just what I was told, because I wasn't with her every minute. I really didn't know what her schedule was, being an adult. That's just what we were told, that she had stayed there that night.
She and Brandon had some sort of relationship. We're not sure how deep it was. It was they only known each other not even 2 months. But do you believe that she was staying in his place partly because of the problems that she was having with her roommate Jessica, and Jeremy staying there and not paying any rent? Could that have been a part of it?
It may have been. I also think that she felt real comfortable with Brandon. Brandon was helping her out. She had recently pawned her guitar, which was one of her loves, and he didn't want she was going to lose it. And he went and got her guitar out. He had helped her, with a little cash here and there for gas. He was very uplifting and encouraged her to just hang in there. And Jennifer was a very independent person. She didn't want to have to depend on anybody to help her. She could do it herself. And I know Jessica had commented that Jennifer was very upset because she didn't want Brandon to have to help her. And Jessica had told her, enjoy it. He cares for you. He wants to help you, Jennifer. Let someone do something for you. And I think it was just comforting for her in the respect that he had her. She had him to encourage her, but yet she felt bad that he was having to help her out. He was going to have her cell phone turned back on the Monday or Tuesday after I talked to her, right around the time she disappeared.
Because at the time she disappeared, her cell phone wasn't working.
No, it was still disconnected. In fact, the call she made to us that Sunday was on Brandon's cell phone.
Did anybody see her actually show up back at her place on July 13th that morning? Did any rumors, anything like that? And the roommates, I guess, weren't there that morning when she allegedly got back to her place?
No, what I understand is they were both at work during the day, and then they had activities, things they had to do after she got off work. After they got off work. I don't recall anybody saying they actually saw her at the trailer. There were people that said they saw a vehicle around there that morning, a black lowrider vehicle. One young man, I don't know his name, said that he noticed she was at home, went up, knocked on the door. There was no answer. He commented that the door was open, but he didn't hear any activity inside. But when Brandon was called that she hadn't shown up for work, he had gone to the trailer. And bear in mind, this is what I've been told. No actual facts.
Okay.
But he had gone to the trailer. Her car was there. The front door was shut, presumably locked. He didn't feel comfortable, going in to the trailer, and that she never came to the door. But as far as anyone seeing her physically there, I don't know of anyone that did that.
So there is the possibility, and we just need to throw that out there, that it's a possibility that possibly somebody else put her car there. Possibly. We just need to be open-minded to that.
Right.
Okay. So how do people finally end up figuring out that Jennifer is missing, and how did you find out? What went on in that July 13th, July 14th? What went on then?
Well, when Jessica and Jeremy were contacted that she didn't show up for work, nobody could locate her. The car was there, she wasn't there. I guess they went home. They're the ones who actually found both sets of Jennifer's keys to her vehicle were hung up inside the trailer, just inside the door. They started calling around. Jeremy called my husband that evening and asked if he had heard from Jennifer that she didn't show up for work and no one had been able to contact her. And of course, Jack, my husband, hadn't talked to her since Sunday and told him no. And so they continued, I guess, calling friends, going to places she usually might go. And I guess Jessica and Jennifer did talk a lot or text a lot. And Jessica was alarmed that she didn't, of course, her phone was out.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, when nothing came up of Jennifer, the Wednesday afterwards, which would have been the 14th, she didn't go by to pick up her check. No one had seen or heard from her, which was real unusual. And even if Jennifer had gone to a party, she generally let someone know where she was going, and she always took her own ride because you never know. She never wanted to get at a party or somewhere where there was something going on that she was uncomfortable with. She always made sure she had a way out. And so it was all very alarming. Jack, when we couldn't they couldn't contact her, Jack called the sheriff's department. I think the Lubbock Police Department is the first ones to go out there, which it is in the county, and they did a search of the trailer, the property around the trailer, Jennifer's car. They supposedly did an aerial. The sheriff's department was called in because it was their jurisdiction. I suppose they did more of the same. And at that time, I didn't know what was going on because my husband was trying to protect me. And I was at work as normal. And then on the 14th, the morning of around noon, I guess, on the 15th, which would have been that Thursday, Jack got a call from the sheriff's department saying that they were going to go broadcast this as a missing, endangered adult, and that I needed to be told because it was going to air that afternoon. So Jack came and told me, and that's when our world fell apart for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went over to New Mexico. You and Jack, your husband, drove over to Texas.
We didn't go over until it was probably the Monday. They put the broadcast on Thursday. One of the detectives early on we were talking on the phone. She gave me a list of numbers on Jennifer's cell phone and a list, kind of like a number list she had gotten out of Jennifer's car, I guess, and asked if I would like to call. And so I started calling people and jotting down notes. And then we met with the detectives, I guess, the Monday afterward. It was the first time I'd ever been at the trailer Jennifer was living at. And her friends had started putting flyers up on the 14th. There was another young girl missing from that area May 4th, and her dad immediately became real involved in Jennifer's disappearance, and he had flyers printed out and Jessica and Jeremy and a lot of her friends started hitting Lubbock hard, putting out flyers, and I had a hard time leaving home because even though Jennifer lived in Lubbock, this is her home,
Yeah,
and I wanted to
Hobbs.
be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I felt like if something was wrong or she contacted anybody, that was, when cell phones were really getting big. They weren't that big for me at that time, but we had a landline that we'd had for 40 years, and I wanted to be here because I knew this is where she would come. If anything, if something was wrong, this is home. This is where she would come. And then they had the search, I believe it was on the first huge search was on the 22nd, I believe, of July.
Mhm. And nothing of hers was found, any of her belongings and we're going to get into that in a second, but none of her belongings. Did anybody say that they saw her somewhere, anything like that?
Um, I don't know of anybody that actually saw her from the time that she left work and then Brandon's.
Mm-hmm.
Greg Parrott was the first detective on the case, and he had commented that she may have been seen at a bar on the night of the 12th, but I don't know that there was ever any proof of that. Her ID, her checkbook, her cell phone, all of that was in her car, so she wouldn't have had any ID to get into a bar. I don't know if that was ever proven or not, but no one, to my knowledge, laid eyes on her.
What was missing? I mean, of her possessions, of course, she is missing, but you just said that I would say some of the things that usually disappear with a person when a person disappears, like ID or a cell phone, you're telling the listeners that those things were all found. What are some of the things that were missing?
The only thing I'm aware of that was missing was a small beaded purse, which I actually found the receipt for in her car. My daughter and her receipts,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the size of a small baggie, maybe, with a little tie string on top. And the only other time that I ever saw her with it, when she came down to visit me in April, was like lip gloss or small pens. Or Jennifer never was without a pen because she jotted down names and phone numbers. I mean, hundreds of pieces of little paper where there'd just be a name and a number, and um, that's the only thing. There's a little bit of confusion of what she was wearing when she disappeared. I can't possibly know if there were any clothes missing or anything because she had so many clothes, but
And
to my
that was the
knowledge,
first time you were ever. That's the first time you were ever even to her trailer. So how are you to
right,
know?
right.
Mm-hmm. What about her car? You had told me possibly, you don't know this for a fact, but you had heard that the seat in the car had been pushed back.
Right. First thing that my oldest daughter noticed is that the seat was way back. Um, I don't think that was noticed before. I think the evidence wasn't covered really well. I think multiple people might have been in and out of that car several times, but the seat was pushed further back than you would think Jennifer would have been able to drive. She did drive with it back, but with her legs stretched out almost straight. But Shelley said, Mom, her legs wouldn't have fit. It was too far back. So
How tall was Jennifer?
about 5'5", 5'6".
Okay, so maybe a little taller than your average woman. So if the seat
Yeah,
was pushed way back, might have been more likely to have been driven by somebody taller, maybe a guy, maybe 5'10", 6 foot. We just don't know. Possibly.
possibly.
Possibly. Or it could be that she got home and she moved the seat back because she was looking for something under the seat. We just don't know.
Exactly.
Okay. But there was a note found in the car. What can you tell? What can you tell the people about the note?
Well, there was, like I said, little pieces of paper. There were actually two, a name of a young man with a number. There was another, there were two of them. And then there was one with the name Ollie, and a number was with it.
And
I don't
and
know
when
if
you
it meant
say
anything.
Ollie, is that ALI or is that OLLIE?
OLLIE, I
Okay.
believe.
Okay. We're not going to say his last name, but he is kind of a shady character, isn't he?
Well, I found out later through Greg Parrott that this Ollie person is the right-hand man to a couple of guys that are affiliated with the Banditos. Their names are Chris and Nick. And so, whether that kind of brings an alarm up that this guy's name is in her vehicle and he's the right-hand man of these two guys that are most definitely into
Drugs and
prison street
gangs
gangs. Yeah.
and weapons trafficking and things like that.
Yes.
So there's a possibility that Jennifer and her travels around Lubbock might have run into this guy maybe at a bar or maybe at the smoke shop, something like that. And his name was in her car when her car was searched after she disappeared.
Yeah, actually, I'm the one who, after we got the car back, I'm
Mhm.
the one that found that.
You did.
The police didn't have it in custody until I sent it to them.
Do you remember if that was in her handwriting, or would you say that that note was written in somebody else's handwriting?
It was definitely in her handwriting, and it was jotted down on a flyer from an arcade there in Lubbock.
Was that someplace that her friends said she might have normally gone, this arcade, or is that a flyer that you could find anywhere in town, or would you have to, do you know if you'd have to go to that arcade to get one?
I don't know. I didn't even pay any attention to the fact other than it was a flyer that it was jotted on. I'm sure I could find it. I don't know why I never did, because I went to every tattoo parlor in Lubbock that Jennifer had ever been to, and I actually met a couple of guys that were known that Jennifer loved that did her tattoos, because she loved tattoos. And but I never did. Don't remember ever thinking about the arcade.
That's fine. Maybe that's something we can look into further. That might be a decent lead. Now, we're going to go to another side of this, and I know this is going to be maybe a little difficult, but we need to talk about it. And that is the cops at some point, when they started looking into this, they had said that Jennifer might have been living what some people might have called a double life. What can you tell the listeners about that?
Well, I guess the trips that we went over to talk to the officers, and I'm her mom, and I saw all the good in Jennifer. I knew that there was things that a daughter didn't want her mom to know about, especially when you're adult. It was her life, and I just recalled all the wonderful things, and we had gone over there, and I guess it was their way of breaking it to me that there was proof that maybe she had been at least knowledgeable of some really rough gangs and people that were affiliated with these gangs, and that maybe she was living a double life. When she was with us, she was being what she knew we would want her to be. She didn't want to disappoint us. But when she was out there, she had a total different life. And that was kind of hard to swallow. Jennifer was very smart, had a very high IQ, had a lot of common sense, and it was hard for me to swallow. It was hard for me to believe.
That she was running around with some people who were selling drugs, doing drugs. The possibility that Jennifer was doing that herself, maybe not to the extent of some of these other people, but she was just running around in some tough circles where to be part of that circle, you have to sometimes do what they do.
Exactly. I saw a change in Jennifer probably the last 7 months before disappearance, and there was some telltale signs that made me believe that she was probably into things that she shouldn't be or should be careful for. But yeah, I think she was definitely involved in some drug activity, and I don't know to what extent, but with her coming missing, the horrors can only make the horrors in my mind 100 times worse. But yeah.
And she had said something to you, and I don't have in my notes exactly when she first said it to you. Maybe you can remember and tell the listeners this. But at one point, she actually kind of asked you maybe what you might call a hypothetical question of what you would do if you had seen somebody murdered. What can you tell the listeners about that conversation?
Okay. Well, Jen had come down to spend 3 or 4 days, which was wonderful because generally it was just like a 24-hour thing. And she had come down. We were having a wonderful time. We were jamming to Nickelback and shopping, and we were on our way back from looking for her some jeans, and just out of the blue, she said, "Mom, if you had a friend that witnessed a murder, what would you tell her to do?" Well, I kind of shocked me, and I told her, well, she needs to go to the authorities immediately. And I said, she goes, but she's really scared to do that. And I said, well, she still needs to go. They can protect her, but if she witnessed a murder, she needs to go to the authorities and let them know. And I don't know, just something about the way she asked me. I looked at her and I said, Jennifer, is this about a friend or about you? And she said, oh, no, Mom, it's hypothetically, really. It's just kind of like if I had a friend that saw a murder. And then we went on and went to Penny's and, continued loving and enjoying ourselves. And nothing else was ever brought up about it.
And once again, how long was this before she disappeared? Do you remember?
That was in April. Probably the middle of April. So May, June, 2.5.
Not long before.
2.5 months. Yeah.
And it should be known for the record that you are not the only person that she kind of had this conversation with, was she? Where she kind of posed a hypothetical. She did this to other people too, that you knew.
Yeah, actually, it's been brought up probably 3 to 4 times. The first time that it was brought up was the first day I went to her trailer and was visiting with Jessica, and we were going over who she might have been involved with, what was going on. Jessica had actually commented that rumors were that Jennifer might have witnessed a murder. And not too long before that, a young man named Julio had been murdered right outside Lubbock. And Jessica had mentioned Julio's name. Well, that rang a bell to me because of what Jennifer had told me. And then later on, um, I'm trying to think in sequence. This was years later, actually. Trey, or Maxie, Trey and Maxie are the same person, the friend of hers that she met from back in 2000.
The ex-boyfriend who...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That got angry and she had changed her cell phone to keep him from contacting her. After Jennifer's disappearance, a couple of years after, my youngest daughter had moved back to Lubbock. Well, Trey got involved with Jackie, and they were not in a good place. There was a lot of dope going on. It was not a good time. Well, Jack and I, actually, it was about the time of Joanna Rogers' funeral, and we had gone over there, and I told Jack, I said, Jack, we're going to have another missing daughter if we don't get Jackie home. So we went back to Lubbock to pick up Jackie, and she was not in good shape, but Trey went to eat lunch with us and to get Jackie something to eat while we were packing up the vehicle. And while we were eating, he commented on that him and Jennifer had witnessed a murder.
Now, Trey is saying he witnessed a murder.
Yeah, that Jennifer and him witnessed a murder.
Okay.
And then another time, for years and years, I made notes, I researched, and I wanted to talk to a professor Jennifer had in her paralegal class. And so I got the information. I talked to the woman. I think she's retired now. She seemed to be wonderful. She bragged on how sharp and smart Jennifer was, and that she was one of her best students, and how she just adored her. Well, the feeling was mutual. Jennifer loved this professor. And we went on to talk, and she said that Jennifer had been in class one day, and she just wasn't her peppy, smiley self. And after class, I suppose, she talked to her, and that Jennifer broke down and told her that she had witnessed a murder. And the professor said, there's no doubt in my mind that these two men that had been brought into the scene because of Ollie's name being found in Jennifer's vehicle, she said, there's no doubt in my mind that they got rid of Jennifer to keep her quiet. Well, that blew my mind. I wasn't expecting that out of a professor, or that Jennifer would have broke down and confided in her that way.
When did this happen? When did she say this to the professor? She told you in April of 2004. Was it before or after that she told this professor?
I can't tell you.
No.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
That's all right. I could only assume it was. I think probably it had to be between January and April of that year, because that was the last year she actually, I think, took classes. Maybe it might have been the end of 2003. I'm not real sure.
So she was telling this to this professor a full month, like 4 or 5 months before she ever brought it up to you. So when she brought it up to you, this must have been something that if it did happen, if it actually happened, it's something that had been on Jennifer's mind for a long time, and it finally, she felt like bringing it up to you after already bringing it up to a professor months before that.
That could have been the sequence.
Okay.
I don't know. It's been a long time. Sorry.
That's all right. No, I completely understand. You don't have to make any apologies, Vicky. Did Trey when Trey said that these years later, did he happen to say if he also saw this murder, who was it?
He didn't say.
He wouldn't say, or did you push him on it, or?
He kind of made me sick. I mean, I really couldn't stand him, and I I think my only thought at that point was this guy is full of BS. I want to get my daughter and I want to get away from this place. He had made the comment that Jennifer had said if I could find a man that was like Nick and you, he would be the perfect man. And it just really made me want to throw up.
And who was Nick?
I wanted, he was one of the two guys in the
gang.
in the Bandito gang.
Okay, well we're just gonna have to leave it at that. If Trey is gonna say something like that and not say actually who he saw murdered, then we know what kind of character. If he's not gonna admit it, then we know what kind of character he has already. And you're right. He might have been totally lying anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So we have these unusual statements about her seeing this murder. And any idea, I mean, I know you've looked into it and probably the police have looked into it. Is there anybody, you had this Julio guy who was murdered. Is there any possibility if Jennifer did see something of who that murder might have been of?
I've gone back to timelines of murders that happened around Lubbock as far back as 2001. Nothing really fits the timeline of when Jennifer told me that. Like, I don't know exactly when she told the professor. Little Joanna disappeared May 4th, and Jennifer had already told me that, so it couldn't have been Joanna. Julio was murdered sometime after April also, so
that couldn't be it
wouldn't
either.
have been him. No, but I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of murders and stuff that probably happened that may never hit the media. I don't know that,
of course.
But
right.
From my research, I couldn't find anybody that would come close to being what Jennifer was talking about.
Okay. Now, there was another comment, and we're just going to hit on this for about a minute. She'd also made the comment when you had expressed, that she might have been, maybe doing some things she shouldn't be, and you saw this downward track that she was on, even though probably she was doing her best to try to cover it up. She said that don't worry about me, Mama. I have friends who are cops.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what she meant by that? And did she ever mention any names?
She never mentioned any names. I don't know if she meant the cops that patrol the nothing but smokes on a regular basis. I don't know. I suspect she might have known some cops just from being, out on the streets, being at the concerts. They're patrolled by police officers, and there's a dozen places she might have befriended several cops, but she never gave me any names. She just told me, Mom, don't worry. I've got friends that are cops. I'm safe. So that's really all I know about that.
So it could have just been a patrolman who popped in once in a while. It could have been a detective she ran into, and possibly being around the people that she was around. Maybe some police were coming around, detectives were coming around to talk to some of them about their activities, and maybe she got to know a few of them. We just don't know. But for the record, she never mentioned any names.
No, she didn't.
Okay. Let's move on to some possibilities. Brandon, we've talked about Brandon a little bit, and allegedly, as far as we know, he was the last person to see her. To your knowledge, how well did the cops look into him? Was he forthcoming with the police? Did he have an alibi? What can you tell the listeners about the cops looking into him?
From what I understand, he was very cooperative. He was very upset about her disappearance, worried, and I think they probably interviewed him on several occasions. I've been told that he was given a polygraph test and he passed it on at least twice. This is what I've been told by the detectives on the case, and I guess his alibi was proven that he was there at his shop working, except for the time he went to find out if Jennifer was at the trailer, maybe asleep, or when he went to check on her there. But from what I understand, he was very cooperative. I met Brandon. He was very kind. I went back several months later. I went back and got her guitar. He still had her guitar. And then I went back the third time, and it was still probably a couple of months after Jennifer's disappearance, and I was quite blunt with him. And he claimed he didn't know of any associations with some of the people that had been brought up. He didn't know that Jennifer had anything to do with them, and that they always just had a good time, enjoyed each other. And I point blank asked him if he thought she was dead, and he just looked at me and he said, I don't know. I don't know what's happened to her.
So even though he had been going out with her, spending time with her for 4 to 6 weeks, he never told you about any of this other stuff with drugs or anything like that that might have been involved in Jennifer's life. And in fact, you don't believe that Brandon was involved in any of that, do you? Himself?
I don't.
No. So he never told you he gave you any reason to believe that Jennifer was leading some kind of double life, and that he just nothing regarding that at all. Even though the police said that, he never really expressed that.
No, he never gave me an indication that she was involved in any of these other people at all. I mean, he felt as surprised about it as what I was. And even when I talked about Jennifer's angry, bad side, when she could kind of go nuts, he even told me, he said, I've never seen that side of her. He said, I've just never seen that side of Jennifer. It's something I've never experienced. Because Jennifer could get out there sometime. When she got mad, you better watch out. But he had never even seen that side of Jennifer. So I think they had a safe, comfortable relationship. I think they cared about one another. I don't feel like Brandon had anything to do with her disappearance, or that he knows what's happened. Some people think he might not be saying everything he knows, but I don't feel that way.
But excuse me, I'm sorry, but he never went on any of the searches, though, did he either?
No, in fact, he never made an attempt to contact me ever. I've checked on him through looking up his Facebook, see what he was doing. Friends of ours that know him, I've checked up on him, but he's never reached out to find out anything about the case or what's going on or how we are. But you have to remember, too, she had disappeared when I met Brandon. I know it had to be real uncomfortable for him, but no, he's never reached out to this day.
How about we have to remind maybe listeners a little bit that at the time Jennifer was having some roommate issues, and to the point that, while her car was parked there, her tires were slashed. I'm not saying one of the roommates did it, but who knows? We had James, who moved out, who was Jessica's boyfriend, and they broke up. But maybe he had the hots for Jennifer, and then the new guy, Jeremy, wasn't paying his fair share, I guess you could say, at least in Jennifer's mind. Were they investigated? Anything come of any of that?
I'm not real sure. I don't know that James was ever talked to. I don't know if his name was ever brought up. I had made a timeline that gave the detectives that information, and I would certainly think he should have been someone they talked to, but I don't know that ever happened.
Okay. Let's move on to Dax. Once again, he's a guy that we mentioned
the beginning of this interview. Was he looked into? We have to maybe remind the listeners he and Jennifer had a falling out over some money, and he took her to court and didn't get all the money that he wanted. Was he ever looked at? Any suspicions in his direction in your mind?
I've got an email from my detective at that time, and he had said he had talked to Dax and interviewed him, and that he didn't feel like Dax had anything to do with her disappearance. And this was probably in October, November of 2004.
Now, it should be known, and this is just something that I discovered within the last, we're doing this conversation on Monday, July, what is today, the 24th of 2017. I found out within the last 24 to 48 hours that Dax, some years after Jennifer disappeared, he actually shot somebody. I'm telling this to the listeners now, and I've already told Vicky about this. He actually shot somebody. It was allegedly in self-defense. I don't think he went to jail or anything, but he did shoot somebody. I don't know the exact circumstances, but I found that out. But as far as Jennifer's disappearance, at this point, I don't believe that he is considered to be a suspect. So that brings us to Trey. There were some things that went on with Trey. Of course, you got to meet him a few years later, and in fact, your younger daughter got to know Trey. But you had heard some things about him in regards to he had a new roommate named Jed and how he reacted around the time that Jennifer disappeared. And of course, we also have to remind the listeners that Jennifer changed her phone number because of Trey. What can you tell the listeners about how Trey acted when he found out that Jennifer might have been being friends with his new roommate, Jed?
Well, from my understanding, Jed was an avid softball player, that he went to games in Slayton, which is a town not far from Lubbock, and that Jennifer had gone to one of his games and actually liked Jed. And when Trey found out that she was hanging out with Jed, he was at nothing but smokes and just went ballistic. Threw a big fit, was being ugly to the point that his boss and coworkers told him if he didn't leave the establishment that they would have to call the police. And I would think this happened again sometime between, I'd narrow it down probably from February. Oh my, I don't know. That would probably have happened after April.
After you talked to her in April, and then when she said about witnessing a murder, that conversation, it might have happened sometime after that Trey found out about Jennifer and being friends with Jed.
Yeah, actually, that would have been closer to the time of her disappearance. That would have been in June.
That he found out about Jed.
Yeah, and threw a fit and was being real wanting to be with Jennifer. And, it would have been around the same time that she changed her cell phone number.
And I'm sure maybe that was part of the reason that she changed her phone number. We're just not sure at this point. And there's a precedent to this that you'll remember, the listeners should remember that Trey used to have a roommate named Holland, and it seemed that Jennifer took a liking to Holland over Trey a few years before that. And then you could say here more in the present, in 2004, that Jennifer was taking more of an interest in Jed, although it seems like they just had a common interest in softball, that once again maybe Trey was getting passed over. Again, maybe that was something in his mind.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Do you know if the police looked at Trey, that they ever, you eventually got to talk to him again, and this is the same guy that says a few years later that he actually witnessed a murder with Jennifer, so who knows where his mind is. Did the cops look into him, talk to him, polygraph him? Do you have any knowledge of that?
Well, I know that they talked to Trey. I think he actually offered to talk to him. I can remember the comment being made around the first few weeks of her disappearance that Trey was acted very nervous, that he acted scared, and I also had seen Trey at the smoke shop when we went over and we're going to places. This was within a month after Jennifer disappeared. He was working there. He seemed a little shocked. He seemed wired, like he was probably speeding, but he just started jabbering about how he lived in this vacant hotel type place and he was doing repairs and that he was staying there and that he just happened to come to Nothing But Smokes on the day that Jennifer disappeared, and he was working there again. And
Now let's just were he and Jennifer working together when she changed her phone number to avoid him, or when did he start working at Nothing But Smokes?
I'm not sure when he did that. I was reading some KCBD notes that I'd taken of interviews and where Trey actually gave an interview after her disappearance, and that's the first time I actually knew that they worked together there. It sounds like he probably did work there with her at one point. Maybe that's when they started talking and she became friends with him again, and that I'm just not real sure.
I need to ask you this. Could it be that once that Jennifer disappeared, he was the one who took her place at Nothing But Smokes?
That's what it sounded like to me from talking to him that day at Nothing But Smokes.
He made it sound like once they hired him back after Jennifer disappeared.
Yeah, that he just happened to show up there on the day that she disappeared, and he went to work. If I remember correctly, which I do, I think I've got that pretty straight.
Okay, that's very peculiar timing, Vicky. I guess I would say, if I could say that, it's very peculiar timing.
And he also commented to me at that point that even though Jennifer had canceled her cell phone, that they had been to a party on July 4th, but there was no drugs involved, that Jennifer was doing really good, and they had both decided to, take another path, but he made a point of saying that he had seen her on July 4th and everything was fine.
But she never told you that?
No.
No, as far as you knew, the last time you heard about Trey is she was trying to get away from him because he was too serious and she's changing her phone number.
Right.
Okay. All right, so those are some of the people that maybe had a grudge against Jennifer that we know of in her circle. Then we have, of course, a gang angle. We have the name of that guy in her car. There's variety. There's this suspicious black truck that we have seen near her place. That's something that's noted on the charleyproject.org site and elsewhere. So we have a lot of different possibilities here, and I guess that's why this is a case that is still unsolved. But we've gone through some of the major players in Jennifer's life. What's it been like for you, Vicky, in the last 13 years? And what's it been like for your two daughters as well, and your husband?
Well, of course, anyone that's lost a loved one can understand that it's been devastating. Not knowing what happened, not knowing where she is, it's changed all of our lives. I basically shut down pretty much. All I could think about was researching this and trying to find out this. And, I had my other two daughters that suffered because they lost their sister as well as their mom. And it could have ruined our lives, except for in the back of our hearts, we know that Jennifer wouldn't want this to tear up our lives. She would want us to keep loving each other and keep walking in hope. And that's what we've done. You know, there's been rough times, terribly rough times, but at the end of the day, we've all got each other, and my girls and my husband and friends and people I don't even know, like yourself, that I've just met along this path has been angels that help us put one foot in front of the other and give us that hope that somebody will come forward and at least let us bring her home, let us know what direction to go. Because at this point, you know, I feel like that Jennifer is gone. And, but there's, with missing persons, there's always but what if. And, you know, it's kind of hard to know what direction to take when you don't know what's happened. And if someone out there has harmed her, they need to be held responsible for it. I know it's been a lot of years, but they need to be held responsible. And even if they've changed and have a new life now, they took somebody that was loved very, very much away from us. And they need to come forward. We need to find out who that person is and bring them to justice. And I feel like just in our conversations today that someone in this group of people knows something and they need to come forward.
When you say this group, the people, some of these names who were friends of Jennifer's back at the time, whether it's a roommate or a boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, friend, these people you believe know more than they're saying.
Maybe I just think somebody within that group, there's answers in this small group. If somehow, somewhere, somebody in there knows that one little thing that can bring us answers. And they just, I hope they come forward. I hope this jogs someone's mind, conscience, to do the right thing.
I hope so, of course, as well. And the listener should know that I mentioned her name earlier in this interview, but one of Jennifer's friends who didn't live in Lubbock when she disappeared, she had actually, I think, moved back to New Mexico by that time, has been very helpful with you. I got to talk to Allison for over an hour yesterday, and she was very helpful in me understanding some of what happened and what was going on with Jennifer. You know, she knew Jennifer personally. She's been very helpful to you, Allison, hasn't she?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Allison actually is the one that did her balloon release on her 10th anniversary, and it was a lot harder on her than any of us thought to have that balloon release, but she lives in Midland, which is about an hour and a half away, but she organized it, had the balloons here. It was a wonderful ceremony. We had a lot of friends show up, and yeah, Allison's always there for me.
And besides Allison, there's somebody else who has helped you in the last 13 years. We can't mention this person's name. This person knows who they are. And this person, I think, has been helpful to this point, is going to continue to be a resource for you. And I got to talk to this person a few days ago. And this person's been very special as well, right?
Yes, very.
Very. And we're just going to leave it at that. That person's going to remain off the record and confidential for now.
Okay.
Where can people go to find more about Jennifer, about her disappearance? What you're doing, what Allison's doing. You have a Facebook page, right?
Yes, it's Jennifer Wilkerson Missing. It's a public page, and everyone can go in there and, you know, kind of follow what's going on and kind of get an idea of how many people love Jennifer and how there are so many people that are out there that are still looking and caring. And also, if anyone needs to reach out to me, I've got a email address that I created just for Jennifer, and I'm the only one with access to it. I can give you that email address if you'd like.
Go ahead, please. Give it out.
It's J.L. Wilkerson, WILKERSON, 2004 at live.com. And if anyone remembers anything, or they just want to touch base with me or talk or visit, they can reach me. I check that email every day, and I would welcome anybody to reach out that wants to. And also, if anyone remembers anything or has any leads, they can contact the Lubbock Sheriff's Department at 806-775-1400, or they have a crime anonymous tip line that is 806-741-1000. And there is still a reward out there for anybody that brings forward information that can help us bring Jennifer home. I believe it's about $10,000, which isn't a lot, but it's a little. And if someone can give us answers that can help us solve her disappearance and bring her home, then that's still on the books.
Thank you for all of that, Vicki. So we got a Facebook page, we have the email, we have the Lubbock Police Department, and then there is the tip line, and then there's still a reward for any information leading to finding Jennifer and solving the case. Any last words, anything you'd like to say to the listeners before we finish up this interview, Vicki?
Well, just first of all, I want to thank you for being here for me and encouraging me to have, to be able to talk. And I thank you so much, Ed. I really appreciate everything that you do, not only for me, but for all of the missing people that you can. And just for everybody out there, just please search your heart, search your mind. If you remember the least little bitty thing, it might seem unimportant to you, but it might be just the thing that the officials need or that could lead us in the right direction. So please contact someone.
Thank you for your words, Vicki. And yes, I would urge the listeners, anytime you know anything, please come forward. Even if you're afraid, if there's somebody in Lubbock, Texas right now listening and maybe knows something, and if you do know some, you think that it might put you in danger by coming forward with the information, there is an anonymous tip line. There are ways these days that you can pass information on without being discovered who you are. So it's very important. And Vicki, I deeply appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that was my interview with Vicki Wilkerson, mother of Jennifer Wilkerson. I thank her for appearing on the program. I also must thank Jennifer's friend Allison, who helped put this episode together. She saw Jennifer quite a bit in those early days in Lubbock, and she continues to amass information on Jennifer's case. In fact, she is one of the administrators on Jennifer's Facebook page. Lots of suspects, lots of suspicious characters, and we left some names out to protect the safety of Vicki and her family. Yes, that's how bad some of these people are. Truthfully, though, I happen to doubt that any of those rough individuals had anything to do with her disappearance. I have no proof of that. But the truth is, there are a lot more regular people killing others than gangs are. That's a fact. Maybe you could call that the double life of crime stats in the United States. How it appears on the surface is not what is going on underneath. But in Jennifer's case, we can't totally rule out the possibility of a serial killer. And to talk about this, I need to touch upon something that Vicki mentioned during our interview. That being the murder of Joanna Rogers. She and Summer Baldwin were killed in the Lubbock area by Rosendo Rodriguez back in 2004, a guy who's become known as the suitcase killer because both women were found in suitcases in a landfill. He was doing this right around the time Jennifer disappeared. So, did he kill Jennifer? Is it possible? Yes. But the connections he had to both Summer and Joanna were established quite quickly once the first suitcase was seen in a landfill and opened. Whereas here we are 13 years later and no connection has ever been made between himself and Jennifer. Furthermore, Jennifer never mentioned his name to anyone. She never told anyone about knowing a Marine. Rosendo was one. No proof he ever came by the Wells Fargo or Nothing But Smokes or any of the other places that Jennifer could be found or hung out. No evidence that their paths ever crossed. So at this point, I think it's a stretch, but I'm not saying it's impossible. However, to my knowledge, Rosendo has never been asked about Jennifer Wilkerson. Adding on to that, I'd like to make a couple more points before we finish this program. 2 points that were mentioned in the interview and one that wasn't. First, the point that wasn't. Jennifer was a smoker. And what I know is smokers go nowhere without their smokes. But her cigarettes weren't found in her car. They weren't found in her trailer. Neither was her lighter. Vicky and Allison verified this. To me, that means one of two things. Either she left willingly from her place on July 13th, 2004, taking her cigarettes with her, thus this wasn't some kind of violent abduction, or she really never did drive home July 13th, 2004, and whoever made it look that way forgot to plant her cigarettes somewhere, either in her car or her trailer. The point that was mentioned in the interview, and I want to expound on it a little bit, has to do with Jennifer saying she had cop friends. This is something she talked about with many people. She was proud of it. It was in the public light. But it should be known, to this day, nobody knows who those cops were. None ever came forward to say they knew her after she disappeared. In fact, we know many more of the criminals she knew than any of the cops she knew. Could this be something along the lines of her "what if you saw a murder" statement? Some kind of unprovable utterance that Jennifer made? Maybe, but I'm not so sure. Here's why. If you go back and take a look at the Lubbock Police Department since Jennifer's disappearance, it has had its share of scandals. Greg Parrott, he was mentioned in the interview. He was the detective on the case. He had to resign, and he had issues at other places after Lubbock. And he is just one. And speaking of that, her friend saw a murder comment that Jennifer made, Vicky got back to me after the interview and said that years later, Trey was still talking about this and said that 7 people had witnessed this murder. No idea as to who those other people were because Trey wouldn't say, and he certainly didn't say who was murdered. And in fact, the more he talks about it, the less I believe it. So I'm not sure what to make of that statement. I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.